The courtroom doors swing open, and she enters like she's walking into a hotel lobby rather than Providence Municipal Court. Designer handbag. Oversized sunglasses perched on perfectly styled hair. Heels that click with authority against the old wooden floor. The kind of presence that turns heads, and not always in a good way. Judge Frank Caprio glances up from the case file on his bench, and for just a moment, his eyebrows raise slightly. He's seen thousands of people walk through these doors over the decades, but something about this one catches his attention. Maybe it's the confidence. Maybe it's the contrast between her appearance and the stack of unpaid parking tickets in front of him. 15 violations. $7,000 in fines. All accumulated over 18 months in downtown Providence. Not a single payment made. She approaches the defendant's podium with her chin high, and when she removes the sunglasses, her eyes scan the room like she's assessing whether it meets her standards. The bailiff calls the case number. Case number 47392. City of Providence vs. Madison Whitmore. Judge Caprio leans back in his chair, that familiar gentle expression settling onto his face. The one that's become famous across social media. The one that says he's already looking past the surface, already wondering about the story beneath the story. He opens the file again, running his finger down the list of violations. Parking in restricted zones. Expired meters. Fire hydrant violations. Handicapped spots. It's a pattern that speaks of someone who simply didn't care about the rules. Ms. Whitmore, Judge Caprio begins, his voice carrying that distinctive Rhode Island warmth that's comforted so many defendants before her. Do you know why you're here today? She shifts her weight slightly, and there's something in that movement. A flicker of discomfort that doesn't quite match the polished exterior. Yes, Your Honor. The parking tickets. Her voice is steady, but Judge Caprio has been doing this too long not to notice the slight tremor underneath. He nods slowly, studying her face. 15 parking tickets, Ms. Whitmore. Over 18 months. That's almost one a month. And according to our records, you haven't paid a single one. He pauses, letting that sink in. Can you help me understand what's been going on? She opens her mouth, then closes it. For the first time since entering, the confidence seems to waver. Your Honor, I can explain. Judge Caprio leans forward slightly, his hands folded on the bench. I'm listening. That's what I'm here for. Talk to me. The courtroom is completely silent. Even the usual rustling of papers has stopped. Everyone can feel something shifting in the air, though no one quite knows what yet. She takes a breath, and when she speaks, there's a defensive edge to her voice. I've been dealing with a lot. My father. He's been handling my finances, and there must have been some kind of mix-up with the payments. Judge Caprio's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. Experience. Recognition. The sense that there's more to this story. Your father handles your finances, he repeats slowly, not as a question but as an observation. How old are you, Ms. Whitmore? 28, Your Honor. He nods again, and there's no judgment in his face, only curiosity. And your father manages your money. Is there a reason for that? She bristles slightly. My family. We're well off, Your Honor. My father is Charles Whitmore. He owns Whitmore properties throughout New England. He's always managed the family accounts. The way she says it, there's pride there, but also something else. Something that sounds almost like a script she's recited before. Judge Caprio picks up a pen, tapping it gently against the file. I see. And did your father know about these tickets? I'm not sure. I thought he was taking care of them. The judge is quiet for a moment, and in that silence, you can see him working through something in his mind. Decades of experience reading people, understanding the difference between excuses and explanations. Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. He pauses, making sure she's really listening. Have you actually spoken to your father about these tickets? She looks away. Just for a second, but it's enough. Not exactly, Your Honor. Not exactly, Judge Caprio echoes softly. What does that mean? And just like that, the first crack appears in the carefully constructed facade. Her shoulders drop slightly. Her fingers grip the edge of the podium a little tighter. I haven't told him yet, she admits quietly. I kept meaning to, but... Her voice trails off. Judge Caprio doesn't pounce on the admission. Instead, he softens even more, if that's possible. But what, Ms. Whitmore? What happened here? And there it is. The question he asks in almost every case. The gentle invitation to tell the truth. To be human. To explain the circumstances that brought someone to his courtroom. She's staring down at the podium now, and when she looks back up, something has shifted in her face. The mask is slipping. Your Honor, I was supposed to have access to my trust fund when I turned 25. That's what I've been waiting for my whole life. That's what my father always told me. Judge Caprio is completely still, watching her with those compassionate eyes. Go on. But when I turned 25 3 years ago, he said I wasn't ready. That I needed to prove I could be responsible first. And then it was 26. And then 27. And now. Her voice catches. Now I'm almost 30, and he still won't release it. The courtroom has transformed from skeptical to captivated. This isn't the story anyone expected when she first walked in. This isn't the spoiled rich girl who thought she was above the law. This is something much more complicated. Much more human. Judge Caprio nods slowly, processing this information. So you don't actually have access to your own money? No, Your Honor. I get a monthly allowance, but it's... She stops herself, seeming to realize how it sounds. It's controlled by my father. The judge leans back in his chair again, his expression thoughtful. And these parking tickets? Why did you park in all these restricted zones? Was there a reason? She laughs, but it's a bitter sound. I was trying to prove I could make something of myself. Without his money. Without his control. I started a small business, a boutique in downtown Providence. I was there all the time, working long hours, and I parked wherever was convenient. I knew I was getting tickets, but I thought once the business took off, I'd be able to pay them all at once. Judge Caprio's expression shifts to something even softer. Understanding. Recognition of someone who was trying, even if they went about it the wrong way. And the business? He asks gently. She shakes her head, and now there are tears forming in her eyes, though she's fighting them hard. It failed, Your Honor. 6 months ago. I lost everything I'd put into it. I've been working retail since then, just trying to get by, and these tickets just kept piling up, and I couldn't. Her voice breaks. I couldn't ask him for help. Because that would mean admitting I failed. Again. The transformation is complete. The woman who walked in with designer everything is now just someone struggling, someone drowning, someone who's been carrying a weight no one could see from the outside. Judge Caprio is quiet for a long moment, letting her compose herself. He's not rushing her. He never does. That's not who he is. Finally, he speaks again, and his voice is even gentler than before. Ms. Whitmore, I want to understand your situation better. You said you've been working retail for 6 months. Where are you working? She wipes at her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the emotion. At a department store in Warwick, Your Honor. In the home goods section. It's part-time, about 30 hours a week. He nods. And what do you make there, if you don't mind me asking? $10.50 an hour, she says quietly. The number hangs in the air. Judge Caprio does the mental math instantly, as he's done countless times before. So roughly $1,200 a month, give or take. Yes, Your Honor. And you mentioned an allowance from your father. Can you tell me about that? She hesitates, and the shame is written all over her face. He gives me $2,000 a month. But it comes with conditions. What kind of conditions? Judge Caprio asks, his tone making it clear this is a safe space to be honest. She takes a shaky breath. I have to send him receipts for everything. Rent, utilities, groceries, everything. He reviews them at the end of each month. If he thinks I've spent money foolishly, he reduces the next month's allowance. After the business failed, he cut it to $1,500 for 3 months as punishment. The word punishment lands heavily in the courtroom. Judge Caprio's expression doesn't change dramatically, but something hardens in his eyes. Not anger at the defendant, but something else. Recognition of a different kind of struggle than he usually sees. Your Honor, she continues, and now the words are coming faster, like a dam breaking. I know how this sounds. I know people hear that I get an allowance and think I'm privileged, and I know I am. But I'm 28 years old, and I can't make a single financial decision without his approval. I can't sign a lease without him as a guarantor. I can't open a credit card. I can't even have a bank account that he doesn't have access to. Judge Caprio leans forward. Why not? Because everything is tied to the family trust. My grandmother set it up before she died. The money was supposed to be mine at 25, but my father is the trustee, and he has complete discretion over when I receive it. And he's made it clear that if I try to fight him legally, if I try to get a lawyer, he'll cut me off completely and tie it up in court for years. The judge is silent, processing this. You can see him thinking about his own children, his own grandchildren. Thinking about the complex dynamics of family and money and control. So you're trapped, he says finally. It's not a question. She nods, and a tear escapes down her cheek. I'm trapped. And I know I should have been more responsible with the parking. I know that. But I was so angry, Your Honor. I was so frustrated with being controlled and monitored and judged, and parking wherever I wanted was this tiny, stupid act of rebellion. It was the only thing in my life I had complete control over, even if it meant getting tickets. Judge Caprio nods slowly. I understand. But you do understand that the city has rules for a reason? That parking in handicapped spots, for instance, prevents people who need those spaces from accessing them? The shame floods back into her face. I know, Your Honor. And I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to explain why I let it get so out of control. Every ticket felt like proof that I could make my own choices, even bad ones. Does that make sense? It does, Judge Caprio says simply. It doesn't make it right, but it makes sense. He flips through the file again, looking at the dates, the locations. Tell me about the boutique. What kind of store was it? A flicker of something crosses her face. Pride, maybe, or the ghost of hope. It was a women's clothing boutique. Sustainable fashion, ethical manufacturing. Clothes that were beautiful but also made responsibly. I've always cared about that, about the environment, about workers' rights. I thought I could build something meaningful. And how did you fund it? Judge Caprio asks. I saved every penny of my allowance for 2 years. I got roommates to reduce my rent. I stopped buying anything for myself. I ate pasta and ramen. I collected $30,000, and I poured all of it into the lease, the inventory, the fixtures. I didn't tell my father until it was already open. The judge's eyebrows raise. And what did he say when he found out? Her laugh is bitter again. He said I was foolish. That I didn't understand business. That I'd fail within 6 months. And then when I did fail, when the location didn't work out and I couldn't afford the rent and the inventory wasn't moving fast enough. She stops, swallowing hard. He said he'd been right all along. That I'd proven exactly why I wasn't ready for the trust fund. Judge Caprio is watching her intently, and anyone who knows him can see the wheels turning in his mind. He's connecting dots, understanding the full picture of who this person really is. Did you ask him for help? When the business was struggling? Once, she whispers. I went to him and I showed him the numbers. I told him if I could just get $15,000 to cover rent for 3 more months, I thought I could turn it around. I had plans for marketing, for pop-up events. I just needed time. And what did he say? She looks directly at Judge Caprio now, and the pain in her eyes is raw. He said no. He said failure was the best teacher I could have. That if he rescued me, I'd never learn. And then he watched me lose everything. The courtroom is absolutely silent. Even the court reporter has slowed her typing, caught up in the story. Judge Caprio takes a deep breath, and when he speaks, his voice carries a weight of understanding. Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to ask you something else. Where are you living now? I have a studio apartment in Pawtucket, Your Honor. It's not much, but it's what I can afford with my income and the allowance combined. And your relationship with your father now? She shakes her head. We barely speak. He calls once a month to review my expenses. Otherwise. She trails off. Otherwise, we don't talk. I haven't seen him in person in 4 months. Judge Caprio nods slowly. What about your mother? Is she in the picture? The change in Madison's expression is immediate and devastating. Her face crumples, and for a moment, she can't speak at all. Your Honor, she finally manages, her voice breaking. My mother passed away when I was 19. Breast cancer. She fought for 2 years, and then. She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't have to. Judge Caprio's own expression softens even further, and anyone who knows his story knows why. He lost his mother young too. He understands that particular pain. I'm so sorry, he says simply, and the sincerity in those 3 words fills the courtroom. Thank you, she whispers. She was the one who always believed in me. Who always said I could do anything. My father. He changed after she died. Became more controlling, more critical. I think he was afraid of losing me too, so he tried to control everything. But it just pushed me away. Judge Caprio is quiet again, and you can see him piecing together the full picture. A young woman who lost her mother, whose father responded by becoming controlling rather than supportive. Who tried to prove herself and failed. Who's been living in this state of suspended adulthood, unable to move forward but unable to go back. These parking tickets, he says finally. $7,000. How were you planning to pay them? She looks down. I wasn't, Your Honor. Not really. I was hoping they'd just. I don't know. I was burying my head in the sand. I knew they were accumulating, but dealing with them meant facing how badly I'd messed up, and I just couldn't do it. It's the most honest answer she could give, and Judge Caprio seems to appreciate that. And if I asked you to pay them today, could you? He asks, though the gentleness in his voice suggests he already knows the answer. She shakes her head. No, Your Honor. I have maybe $800 in savings. That's it. I've been trying to build it back up, but between rent and food and student loans. She stops. Wait, you have student loans? Judge Caprio asks. Yes, Your Honor. $60,000. My father refused to pay for college. He said I needed to have skin in the game, needed to understand the value of education. So I took out loans for all 4 years at Providence College. The judge writes something down, and his expression is thoughtful. What did you study? Business administration and environmental studies, she says. I graduated with honors. For whatever that's worth now. Judge Caprio sets down his pen and leans back in his chair, studying Madison Whitmore with that penetrating but compassionate gaze that's become his trademark. The courtroom remains hushed, everyone sensing they're witnessing something deeper than a simple parking ticket case. Ms. Whitmore, he begins, his Rhode Island accent softening the formality of the words, I've been doing this for a long time. 38 years on this bench. And I've learned that every person who comes through that door has a story. Every single one. He pauses, making sure she's really hearing him. But your story is one that troubles me in a particular way. She looks up at him, confusion and apprehension mixing on her face. Your Honor. You come from money, he continues, but you don't have money. You have education, but you're working retail. You tried to build something, but you had no support. You lost your mother, and instead of your father becoming closer to you, he became your warden. The words hit her visibly, and she grips the podium tighter. Judge Caprio continues, his voice gentle but firm. I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Do you think your father loves you? The question hangs in the air like a thunderclap. Madison's eyes fill with tears again, and she opens her mouth several times before any words come out. I don't know, Your Honor. I used to think I knew. But now I don't know if he loves me or if he loves controlling me. I don't know if he's trying to help me or punish me. I just don't know anymore. Judge Caprio nods slowly, and his expression carries a deep sadness. That's a terrible thing not to know about your own father. He lets that sit for a moment before continuing. Let me tell you what I see when I look at your case. I see a young woman who's been trying desperately to prove herself to someone who may never be satisfied. I see someone who made mistakes, yes, but who made them while trying to find her own identity, her own independence. And I see someone who's been punished for that in ways that go far beyond these parking tickets. She's crying openly now, but she's also listening intently, like someone who's been waiting years for someone to see her clearly. Judge Caprio pulls out a tissue from a box on his bench and hands it to the bailiff, who brings it to her. Thank you, Your Honor, she manages. Ms. Whitmore, I want to ask you about something specific, Judge Caprio says, flipping to a particular page in the file. I'm looking at ticket number 7 here. March 15th of this year. You parked in a handicapped spot at Providence Place Mall. Can you tell me about that day? She wipes her eyes, trying to compose herself enough to answer. That was one of the worst days. I just found out the boutique was definitely going to close. I'd been fighting to save it for 3 months, but the landlord had given me final notice. I went to the mall because I needed to walk, to think. I wasn't paying attention when I parked. Were you in the mall long? Judge Caprio asks. She shakes her head. I couldn't even go inside. I just sat in my car and cried. The judge's expression softens even more. How long did you sit there? I don't know. Maybe an hour? Maybe 2. I just couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't figure out what I was going to do next. Judge Caprio is quiet, and when he speaks again, his voice is barely above a whisper. Did you think about calling your father? She laughs, but it's a sound without humor. Every minute. But I knew what he'd say. I knew he'd tell me he'd warned me. That this proved his point. And I just couldn't hear that. Not right then. The judge nods, understanding written all over his face. What about friends? Did you have anyone you could talk to? Madison looks away, and somehow this question seems to hurt more than any that came before. Your Honor, most of my friends from college. They don't really understand my situation. They see the allowance and think I'm lucky. Or they're my father's friends' children, and if I talk to them, it gets back to him. I've become pretty isolated over the last few years. That's another thing that troubles me, Judge Caprio says quietly. You're isolated. You're controlled. You're struggling. But to the outside world, you look like you have everything. He pauses. That's a special kind of loneliness, isn't it? The recognition in her face is immediate and profound. Yes, she breathes. Yes, exactly. No one understands. Everyone thinks I should just be grateful, but they don't see the cage. Judge Caprio leans forward, his elbows on the bench. Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to tell you something now, and I want you to listen carefully. What your father is doing, this control he has over you, this isn't love. This is something else. Maybe he thinks it's protection, maybe he thinks it's teaching you, but healthy love doesn't trap people. Healthy love doesn't punish people for trying. Healthy love doesn't leave you sitting in a parking lot crying for 2 hours with nowhere to turn. The words land like hammer blows, but gentle ones, necessary ones. Madison is nodding through her tears. I know, she whispers. I've known for a while. But leaving means giving up everything. Means being completely on my own with nothing. And I'm scared, Your Honor. I'm scared I really will fail without any safety net at all. Judge Caprio's expression is infinitely compassionate. Let me ask you something else. If you did have access to that trust fund, what would you do? She looks surprised by the question, like she hasn't let herself think about it in a long time. I'd pay off my student loans first. Then I'd get my own place, a real apartment with my name on the lease. I'd save some for emergencies. And then. She pauses, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, something like hope flickers across her face. Then what? Judge Caprio prompts gently. I'd start over. Maybe not another boutique right away, but something. I'd take business courses, learn from my mistakes. I'd build something slowly, carefully this time. I'd do it right. She meets his eyes. I'd prove to myself that I can do this. Not to him. To myself. The judge smiles, and it's a warm, encouraging smile. Now that's the first thing you've said that tells me who you really are. Not the person trying to rebel against her father. Not the person trying to prove something to him. But the person trying to prove something to herself. He pauses. That's the person I want to help today. Madison looks confused. Help, Your Honor. We're going to get to that, Judge Caprio says. But first, I have more questions. You mentioned student loans of $60,000. What are your monthly payments? $540, she says. And with your income and allowance, how much are you left with after all your expenses? She does the mental calculation. Maybe $200 a month. On a good month. If nothing unexpected happens. And when was the last time you had a good month? Judge Caprio asks with a knowing look. She laughs sadly. I can't remember, Your Honor. He nods, writing more notes. What about health insurance? Do you have coverage? I'm on a high deductible plan through my retail job. It's basically just catastrophic coverage. I can't afford to actually go to the doctor. Judge Caprio looks up sharply. When was your last checkup? She hesitates. Before my mother died. So almost 9 years ago. The judge's expression hardens slightly. Ms. Whitmore, your mother died of breast cancer. You need to be screened regularly. You understand that, don't you? The fear that flashes across her face is genuine and immediate. I know, Your Honor. I know I should. But I can't afford the deductible if they find something. And I'm scared that if I ask my father to help with medical costs, he'll use it as more proof that I can't take care of myself. Judge Caprio sits back, and for a moment, he just looks at her with an expression that's hard to read. Then he does something unexpected. He reaches for his phone on the bench and makes a quick call. Angela, can you come in here for a moment? A minute later, a woman enters the courtroom. She's one of the court administrators, someone who's worked with Judge Caprio for years. He speaks to her quietly, and she nods, then leaves. Madison watches this exchange with growing confusion. Your Honor, what's happening? Judge Caprio doesn't answer directly. Instead, he asks another question. Ms. Whitmore, if you could say one thing to your father right now, what would it be? She's caught off guard by the sudden shift. I don't know. Yes, you do, he says gently. Think about it. What would you say? She's quiet for a long moment, and you can see her really considering it. When she finally speaks, her voice is steady but heavy with emotion. I'd tell him that I didn't need him to save me from failure. I needed him to support me through it. I'd tell him that Mom would have done that. She would have held my hand and helped me figure out what went wrong and encouraged me to try again. And I'd tell him that every day he keeps that money from me isn't teaching me responsibility. It's teaching me that I'll never be good enough. That I'll always be his little girl who can't be trusted, instead of the adult woman I've become despite everything. The courtroom is absolutely still. Even Judge Caprio seems moved, his eyes slightly moist. That was honest, he says quietly. That was real. Thank you for sharing that. He takes a breath. Now I'm going to ask you the hardest question. If I could somehow make it possible for you to have a completely fresh start, completely independent of your father, would you take it? Even if it meant losing the possibility of that trust fund forever? Madison doesn't hesitate. Yes. Yes, Your Honor, I would. Because I'm realizing that money has been like bait in a trap. And as long as I'm waiting for it, I'm not really free. I'm not really living my own life. Judge Caprio nods slowly, and something shifts in his demeanor. The gentle questioner becomes something else. Not harsh, but purposeful. Determined. He picks up his gavel, not to strike it, but just to hold it, like he's feeling its weight. Ms. Whitmore, I need to tell you something about these parking tickets. Something that may surprise you. She tenses, clearly expecting the worst. According to the timeline here, several of these violations occurred during the period when your boutique was open. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you mentioned that you were working long hours, essentially running the business by yourself? Yes, that's right. Judge Caprio flips through the file again, his finger tracing down the addresses. I'm looking at these locations. Benefit Street, where parking is notoriously difficult. Westminster Street, same situation. Hope Street during the holiday season. He looks up at her. These aren't residential parking violations. These are commercial district violations during business hours. You were working. She nods slowly, not sure where this is going. Yes, Your Honor. I was either at my boutique or visiting other small businesses to learn from them, to network. I was trying to do everything right, but I just couldn't afford garage parking every day on top of everything else. The judge sets down the file and looks at her directly. So these weren't acts of rebellion? Not really. These were the parking tickets of someone who was working too hard and too long to worry about feeding meters or finding legal spots. Madison's expression shifts to something between hope and confusion. I guess that's true for most of them. I mean, there were a few where I was just being careless, but yes, most of them happened because I was so focused on trying to make the business work that parking became the last thing on my mind. Judge Caprio nods. That's what I thought. And that changes things. He pauses, and the courtroom leans forward collectively, sensing something important is about to happen. But before I get to my ruling, I need to tell you something else. Something about your father. Madison's face goes pale. What do you mean? That phone call I just made, Judge Caprio says, his voice careful and measured. I asked my administrator to pull up property records for your father's company. Whitmore Properties. She's completely still now, hardly breathing. Your Honor, I don't understand. Ms. Whitmore, do you know where your father lives? The question seems random, and she looks confused. In Barrington. The house I grew up in. Why? Judge Caprio's expression is unreadable. And is it a nice house? It's. Yes, Your Honor. It's on the water. It's beautiful. I'm sure it is, Judge Caprio says quietly. According to the records my administrator just pulled, that house is worth approximately $3.2 million. Your father also owns 4 commercial properties in downtown Providence, 2 apartment buildings in Cranston, and a small shopping plaza in Warwick. The total value of his real estate portfolio is approximately $19 million. Madison nods slowly, still not understanding. I knew he was successful, Your Honor. I just didn't know the exact numbers. Do you know what else the records show? Judge Caprio asks, and now there's an edge to his voice. They show that 3 years ago, right around the time you turned 25, your father transferred the deed of 2 commercial properties into a new trust. A trust with you listed as the beneficiary, but with him maintaining complete control as trustee for an indefinite period. The color drains from her face completely. What? You heard me correctly, Judge Caprio says, his voice gentle but firm. Your father didn't just refuse to give you access to your grandmother's trust. He created an additional trust with his own properties, naming you as beneficiary, but structured it so he maintains total control. She's shaking her head in disbelief. I don't. Why would he do that? Judge Caprio leans forward, and his expression is deeply compassionate. I can't answer that, Ms. Whitmore. But what I can tell you is this: your father has been holding not just your grandmother's money over your head, but his own money as well. Money that he earmarked for you but refuses to let you have. And according to these documents, there's no provision for you to access it until he decides you're ready, or... He pauses. Or until his death. The words hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Madison grabs the podium to steady herself. Oh my God, she whispers. All this time, there was even more money, and he never told me. He never told you, Judge Caprio confirms. And more than that, he's been using the threat of cutting you off from money that you don't even know exists. She starts to cry again, but this time it's different. There's anger mixed with the pain. So it was never about teaching me responsibility. It was about control. It was always about control. I can't speak to your father's motivations, Judge Caprio says carefully. But the facts speak for themselves. And those facts have bearing on your case here today. He picks up his pen again. Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to ask you one more time, if you could walk out of this courtroom today completely free from these tickets, completely free from your father's control, knowing that you might never see a penny of that trust money, would you take that freedom? She doesn't hesitate. Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely yes. Judge Caprio nods, and a small smile plays at the corners of his mouth. That's what I needed to hear. Because I have something to tell you. He gestures to the bailiff, who hands him another folder. While we've been talking, I had my administrator make some additional calls. Did you know that the City of Providence has a hardship program for parking violations? Madison shakes her head. I didn't know that existed. Most people don't, Judge Caprio says. It's not well advertised, but it's there for people who are genuinely struggling, who made mistakes during difficult periods of their lives. The program allows for the complete dismissal or significant reduction of fines in cases where the violations occurred during documented periods of hardship. Hope flickers in her eyes. Your Honor, do you think I might qualify? Judge Caprio opens the new folder. Let's see. You were running a failing business. You were dealing with grief from your mother's death. You were financially strained and emotionally isolated. You were working excessive hours while trying to prove yourself in an abusive family situation. He looks up at her. Yes, Ms. Whitmore, I think you qualify. She gasps, her hand going to her mouth. But that's not all, Judge Caprio continues, and now his smile is growing. I've also taken the liberty of having my administrator reach out to some contacts in the community. Are you familiar with the Women's Business Center of Rhode Island? I've heard of them, Madison says tentatively. They provide support, resources, and mentoring for women entrepreneurs. They offer free business courses, financial planning assistance, and connections to low-interest loan programs for women starting or rebuilding businesses. He pauses. They've agreed to take you on as a client, if you're interested. Madison's legs actually buckle slightly, and she has to grip the podium harder. Your Honor, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet, Judge Caprio tells her. Because there's more. He pulls out another piece of paper. Providence College, where you graduated with honors 9 years ago, has an alumni emergency fund. It's designed to help graduates who are struggling financially. I've contacted them on your behalf, and they've agreed to review your case for potential assistance with your student loan payments while you get back on your feet. Now she's crying hard, but they're different tears. Tears of disbelief, of hope, of something breaking open inside her. How is this possible? She manages to ask. Why are you doing this? Judge Caprio's expression softens even further. Because this is what justice looks like, Ms. Whitmore. Real justice isn't just about punishing people for their mistakes. It's about understanding the context of those mistakes. It's about giving people the tools they need to rebuild their lives. And it's about recognizing when someone is trapped and helping them find a way out. He stands up from his bench, something he rarely does mid-hearing, and looks at her with an intensity that fills the courtroom. Your father may have taught you that you have to earn love, earn support, earn the right to basic dignity and independence. But that's not how the world has to work. That's not how it should work. Madison is openly sobbing now, her carefully constructed exterior completely dissolved. Judge Caprio lets her cry for a moment, then continues. I'm going to make a ruling now, but before I do, I want you to understand something. The help I'm offering you today is not a handout. It's a hand up. It's what you should have received from your father all along. It's what your mother would have wanted for you. Judge Caprio sits back down, and the courtroom is so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone is leaning forward, watching this moment unfold with an intensity that comes from witnessing something rare and profound. The judge picks up his gavel now, holding it with purpose. Ms. Madison Whitmore, he begins formally, his voice carrying the weight of authority but also an unmistakable warmth. I've reviewed your case, considered the circumstances, and examined the context of these violations. I've heard your story, and I've seen the struggles you've faced. And I'm ready to render my judgment. Madison stands as straight as she can manage, trying to compose herself for what comes next. Yes, Your Honor. The 15 parking violations before this court total $7,040 in fines and penalties. These violations occurred over an 18-month period during which you were attempting to operate a small business, dealing with significant personal and family challenges, and working within a financial situation that can only be described as controlled and restrictive. He pauses, making sure everyone in the courtroom is following. Under normal circumstances, these violations would result in either payment of the full amount or a payment plan, with potential license suspension if payment isn't made. Madison nods, bracing herself. However, Judge Caprio continues, his voice warming, these are not normal circumstances. After careful consideration and consultation with the city's hardship program guidelines, I'm making the following ruling. He looks directly at her. All fines and penalties are hereby completely dismissed. The courtroom erupts in gasps and murmurs. Madison's knees actually do buckle this time, and she grabs the podium with both hands. Your Honor, I can't. Let me finish, Judge Caprio says with a gentle smile. The dismissal is contingent on several conditions. First, you must enroll in the Women's Business Center program within 30 days and complete at least 6 months of their mentoring program. Can you commit to that? Yes, Your Honor, absolutely, Madison says, tears streaming down her face. Second, you must work with the Providence College Alumni Services to address your student loan situation and develop a sustainable financial plan. I will, Your Honor, I promise. Third, and here Judge Caprio's voice becomes very serious, you must commit to no parking violations for the next 2 years. Not one. I don't care if you have to walk 10 blocks or take the bus or ride a bicycle. No violations. Because this dismissal is an act of mercy and an investment in your future, but it's also a test of your commitment to doing things the right way, even when it's inconvenient. Understood? Understood, Your Honor, Madison says, nodding emphatically. I promise you won't regret this. Judge Caprio smiles. I don't think I will. But there's one more condition, and this one is the most important. He pauses, and the courtroom holds its collective breath. You must promise me that within the next week, you will speak to a lawyer about your rights regarding these trust funds. Not to necessarily fight your father, but to understand your legal position. To know what your options are. Because knowledge is power, Ms. Whitmore, and right now you're making decisions without all the information. She looks stunned. You want me to talk to a lawyer? I do, Judge Caprio confirms. And to help with that, I'm going to give you the name of a legal aid service that provides free consultations for family trust matters. You don't have to take action. But you should know what your rights are. Will you do that? Yes, Your Honor, she whispers. Thank you. Thank you so much. Judge Caprio brings down his gavel with a firm tap. Case dismissed. All fines dismissed under the hardship provision. The defendant is free to go, subject to the conditions I've outlined. The courtroom breaks into spontaneous applause, something that rarely happens but feels completely appropriate in this moment. Madison is crying so hard she can barely stand, but she manages to look up at Judge Caprio with an expression of pure gratitude. Ms. Whitmore, the judge says, his voice cutting through the applause, before you go, I want to say something else. The room quiets again. You walked in here today looking like someone who had everything together on the outside but was falling apart on the inside. That's one of the hardest places to be, because people judge the outside and never see the inside. They see the designer bag and the nice clothes and they think you have no right to struggle. But I see you. And I want you to know that your struggle is real and valid, regardless of where you come from or what you look like or what people assume about you. He leans forward on his bench. Your father's wealth is not your wealth. His control is not love. His tests are not teaching you responsibility, they're teaching you to doubt yourself. And I want you to leave this courtroom today knowing that you are capable, you are worthy, and you deserve support and compassion, not because you've earned it through suffering, but because you're a human being trying your best. Madison can barely speak through her tears. Your Honor, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by taking advantage of these resources, Judge Caprio says firmly. Thank me by building the life you want, not the life your father thinks you should want. Thank me by being kind to yourself when you make mistakes, because you will make mistakes. We all do. The difference is whether we have people who support us through them or people who use them as weapons against us. He pauses, and his voice softens even more. And Ms. Whitmore? When you do succeed, and I believe you will, remember this moment. Remember what it felt like to have someone see you and help you. And then pay it forward. Help someone else who's trapped. Be the person for someone else that your father should have been for you. She's nodding, crying, barely able to process the depth of what just happened. I will, Your Honor. I promise I will. Judge Caprio smiles warmly. I believe you. Now, my administrator is going to give you a packet with all the contact information and resources we discussed. Take the weekend to process all of this. Call these people on Monday. Start your new chapter. And Ms. Whitmore? Yes, Your Honor. Your mother would be very proud of the woman you're becoming. Not the woman your father is trying to force you to be, but the woman you're becoming in spite of everything. Remember that. The words hit Madison like a wave, and she doubles over with the force of her emotion. The bailiff moves to help her, but she waves them off gently, taking a moment to compose herself. When she stands back up, something is different in her posture. The weight she carried in has lifted slightly. Thank you, Judge Caprio, she says, her voice stronger now. You've given me more than dismissed tickets today. You've given me hope. That's what this courtroom is for, he replies simply. Now go. Start your life. As Madison walks toward the exit, the administrator meets her with a folder full of information. But before she leaves, she turns back one more time to look at Judge Caprio. He's already looking at the next case file, but he glances up and gives her an encouraging nod. She nods back, and then she walks out of the courtroom. Not with the artificial confidence she came in with, but with something more real. Something earned. Something that looks a lot like courage. After she leaves, Judge Caprio sits quietly for a moment before calling the next case. But those who know him well can see that this one affected him. He takes a sip of water, glances at the door she just walked through, and allows himself a small, satisfied smile. This is why he does what he does. Not just to enforce the law, but to find those moments where mercy and justice can meet. Where understanding someone's struggle can lead to transformation instead of just punishment. Where a parking ticket case can become a turning point in a life. The courtroom settles back into its normal rhythm, but everyone who witnessed what just happened knows they saw something special. Something that will be talked about long after the day ends. Because Judge Caprio didn't just dismiss $7,000 in fines. He dismissed the lie that Madison had been living under, that she wasn't good enough, wasn't capable enough, wasn't worthy of support unless she met impossible standards. He saw through the surface to the struggle beneath. He used his authority not to punish, but to liberate. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that this is what the justice system should be at its best. Not blind adherence to rules, but wise consideration of circumstances. Not harsh punishment for every mistake, but thoughtful support for those trying to do better. Not the cold letter of the law, but the warm spirit of mercy. As the afternoon continues and more cases are heard, the story of the woman with the designer bag and the hidden struggle spreads through the courthouse. By evening, it's on social media. By the next morning, it's gone viral. Judge Caprio sees through designer clothes to hidden pain. Rhode Island judge dismisses $7,000 in fines after heartbreaking story. She counted on daddy's fortune, but the judge's ruling left the internet stunned. The comments pour in from around the world. People who've been in similar situations. People who've been controlled by family. People who felt the particular loneliness of looking privileged while feeling trapped. They see themselves in Madison's story. They're moved by Judge Caprio's response. But the real story isn't in the viral videos or the social media comments. The real story is what happens on Monday morning when Madison makes the first phone call to the Women's Business Center. When she schedules the appointment with legal aid. When she opens a new bank account in only her name. When she starts, slowly but surely, building a life that belongs to her alone. Judge Caprio will never know all the details of what comes next for her. That's not how these stories usually work. He plants seeds of hope and mercy and justice, and most of the time, he never sees them grow. But he doesn't need to see it. He trusts that when you give people the tools and support they need, when you see them clearly and help them without judgment, good things happen. Not always. Not perfectly. But more often than not. And that's the message that echoes out from his courtroom day after day, case after case, person after person. That justice without mercy is cold. That law without compassion is blind in the wrong way. That sometimes the right ruling isn't the one that follows the rules most strictly, but the one that serves the human being standing in front of you most fully. Judge Frank Caprio has been doing this for 38 years, and he'll tell anyone who asks that he's learned more from the people in his courtroom than he's taught them. He's learned about resilience and courage. About the quiet struggles people carry. About the difference between explanation and excuse. About how a moment of real seeing, real understanding, real compassion can change the trajectory of a life. The case of Madison Whitmore is just one of thousands he's heard. But it's cases like hers that remind him why he still comes to work every day. Why he still asks what happened here. With genuine curiosity. Why he still believes that every person deserves to have their story heard before judgment is passed. As the sun sets on Providence that Friday evening, Madison sits in her small studio apartment in Pawtucket with the folder of resources spread out in front of her. For the first time in years, she's not thinking about what her father would say. She's not wondering if she's good enough. She's not trapped in that awful space between who she is and who she's supposed to be. Instead, she's planning. Thinking. Imagining. The boutique failed, yes, but now she understands why. She sees her mistakes clearly, but without the crushing weight of shame. She knows what she needs to learn. She knows where to get help. She knows, finally, that she's capable of building something real. And in his home in Providence, Judge Caprio sits down to dinner with his family, as he's done for decades. They ask about his day, and he tells them about the woman with the parking tickets. About the father who controlled her with money. About the moment he saw through her exterior to the pain beneath. About the resources he connected her to. About the hope he saw in her eyes when she left. His wife, Joyce, reaches across the table and squeezes his hand. She knows that look on his face. The look that says he believes he made a difference today. That justice and mercy met in his courtroom and something good came from it. You gave her a fresh start, Joyce says. Frank shakes his head slightly. No. I just cleared away some of the obstacles. She'll give herself the fresh start. I just made it possible. And that, perhaps, is the real lesson of this case. That we can't save people. We can't fix their lives or solve their problems or remove all their struggles. But we can see them. We can understand them. We can remove obstacles where we have the power to do so. We can connect them to resources. We can remind them of their worth and their capability. We can show them that mercy exists, that compassion is real, that not every authority figure will use power to control and punish. Sometimes, that's enough. Sometimes, that's everything. In Providence Municipal Court, Judge Frank Caprio will be back on the bench Monday morning. There will be more cases. More stories. More people struggling with circumstances both visible and hidden. And he'll be there, asking what happened here. And talk to me, and I want to help you. Because that's who he is. That's what justice looks like in his courtroom. Not blind. Not harsh. Not punitive. But seeing. Understanding. Human. And that's why the internet watches. That's why the videos go viral. That's why people around the world are moved by a simple parking ticket case in Rhode Island. Because in a world that often feels cold and judgmental and harsh, Judge Caprio reminds us that there's another way. A better way. A way that sees people as people, not as cases. A way that uses authority to lift up rather than push down. A way that believes in second chances and fresh starts and the fundamental goodness in people trying their best. She counted on Daddy's fortune, yes. But what she found instead was something more valuable. She found someone who saw her truly. Someone who helped without controlling. Someone who believed in her when she'd almost stopped believing in herself. And sometimes, that's worth more than any trust fund could ever be.